How would you assess the current intellectual property landscape in Indonesia, and how is it different to Europe in your expert opinion?
Well, Indonesia has a full suite of intellectual property laws that provide the same minimum standards of protection as we see in all World Trade Organization member countries. I suppose a major point of difference would be in attitudes to intellectual property and respect for the law. That means we see a lot of infringement and counterfeiting activity in Indonesia, and as a result the way we approach IP needs to be tailored to suit. So there's a lot of contentious work to deal with.
What kind of changes, if any, have you seen in Indonesia that have made it easier or more difficult for EU SMEs to manage, protect and enforce their intellectual property rights in recent years?
We've seen some big changes actually. This year we got a new copyright law which introduced stronger protections, increased penalties for infringement, landlord liability, and was generally a big win for rights holders. As we come to the end of 2015 and expect the ASEAN Economic Community to be introduced, we're also expecting a new trademark law that will introduce the Madrid Protocol, a system of administration for an international trademark filing. And that should help SMEs in that it will reduce the cost burden for filing trademark applications.
Why should an SME register their IP in Indonesia?
That's an easy one. Indonesia is a huge market, 250 million people, a third of the ASEAN Economic Community's GDP, and intellectual property rights offer exclusive rights and an advantage over competitors. The trademark system in Indonesia is a first-to-file system, which means no registration, no right, and that's also the case with patents and designs. So if an SME doesn't register their intellectual property rights, then they've lost the opportunity to use that advantage and increase their profit margins.
What is the biggest obstacle facing SMEs when dealing with IP rights in Indonesia, and why?
I think it's access to information. Getting hold of details of registered trademark, patents, designs, any kind of intellectual property rights creates unnecessary time and cost burdens on an SME, and usually an SME has limited resources, so I think that's the biggest issue.
Finally, what would be your first recommendation on intellectual property to an SME entering the Indonesian market?
My recommendation would be to have a comprehensive IP plan, and that should incorporate an audit of intellectual property owned by the SME, a strategy for determining what intellectual property to register and what not to, a strategy for monitoring markets, gathering intelligence on what competitors are doing, and finally an enforcement strategy, when or when not to take enforcement measures in Indonesia, and covers all of those points. Then that will ensure that the SME can fully exploit its intellectual property in Indonesia within the confines of the system here. And it doesn't necessarily have to cost anything to do that. It can all be done in-house. The IPR Helpdesk would be a great first point of call for first-line advice on the framework in Indonesia, within which, of course, the SME would have to navigate its business planning. Again, because it doesn't cost anything, and it does clearly set out the framework within which the SME will be working within in Indonesia.